Welcome to Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. I'm your host, Kim Todd. On Digging Deeper, we have in-depth discussions with those extension experts about important landscape topics. Tonight, we're going to be talking about rots and spots. Thank you for joining us once again for Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. We'd like to welcome our very own Kyle Broderick to the show. He's going to discuss differentiating diseases through distribution, and I dare anybody to say that 3 times in a row. That's your fault, Kyle, because you came up with that title.
I'm not even going to try, because yes, I got stuck up on some girl selling seashells somewhere, and I give up after that.
Some chic six
shores and yeah,
right.
stuff.
We don't do that well.
No.
But you do rots and spots very well, and one of the things you wanted to talk about on digging is the issues that you're having with people not understanding or not realizing how disease moves and the patterns involved with it. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so one of the first things that I'll do whenever I get a sample into the diagnostic clinic or get a phone call question or email question, I'm always going to be asking a lot of questions about what does it look like in the landscape. And so are you seeing any straight lines? Where are these lesions showing up, or where are these blighted areas showing up? Are there any patterns that we're looking for? And really, by answering a lot of these questions, we may not be able to figure out exactly what the main cause is, but at least we can determine whether or not it's environmental or caused by something living, one of our biotic diseases.
Okay, so when you talk environmental, you're talking abiotic. Correct.
Yep. Yeah. So we really like to break things down into 2 main groups, and so we have our abiotic diseases, and those are the environmental things. So, drought, stress, moisture, flooding. If we would have an over fertilization, could be an example of an abiotic disease. Same as a nutrient deficiency is something that I would consider to be an abiotic disease. And then our biotic diseases are going to be those caused by fungi, bacteria, viruses, but the argument could be made that even a lot of insects would be a biotic disease as well, since it's a living organism that is eliciting a response from the plant after continuously irritating the cells. It's kind of our textbook definition.
So for somebody who has one of those rot spots, they don't know whether it's a pattern or not. Mm-hmm. Other than the straight lines, which sometimes we get. Define what you mean by pattern and how that works in the plant world.
Yeah, so really it can be, I like to look at things really from about 3 different levels. And so always want to start off looking at an entire landscape view. And maybe we're not seeing straight lines occur. Maybe sometimes we are, as in this situation here, where we have some blighted turf, but very straight lines that are occurring there. And this is a picture of ascochyta blight on turf. So this is a fungal disease. However, it's a fungal disease that is in direct relation to plant stress. Mm-hmm. And so those blighted areas are where we have root issues that are occurring. And so the roots were unable to take up oxygen, that we have those nice kind of white-brown areas that are really following they're following the areas where previous work had been done. And so the green areas are where we have much less compaction. The blighted areas are where we do have the soil compaction. The roots just aren't able to take up the moisture near as well as we would hope so. Additionally, we may not have straight lines, especially when looking at a lawn. Maybe we have some kind of wavy lines that are going, and maybe you'll see that they're about 2.5, 3 feet apart. And they kind of follow that mowing pattern as well. So really, anytime we are seeing something that's more uniform, that's when I really want to be looking more towards, maybe it's not necessarily an environmental disease that's causing the issue, but at least the main underlying cause for this issue is going to be environmental.
And that includes what we as human beings have been doing, right?
Exactly. Yep. And so yeah, with that last picture there, we had that was some wet turf that had dollar spot, and as you can see, the lawnmower just went right on through, and it's moving those fungal spores all the way around. So that can really give you a good idea, especially in regards to management as well. And when we start seeing us spreading some of these diseases from our management techniques, whether they are mowing or pruning, then we can start to fix how we're doing some of those techniques too.
All right, so if you're looking at whole landscape and then whole plant, talk a bit more about that pattern. What happens next?
Yes.
What do we look at next?
So we've looked at the whole landscape, and now as we're kind of focusing in on that individual plant, we really want to be looking at where are we seeing injury occur on these plants. And when we think about our abiotic diseases, or so the environmental things, we tend to think of those as occurring from top down and outside in. Especially on a lot of our woody plants and shrubs, things like that. Mm-hmm. And compare that to our biotic plant or our biotic diseases. Often those will start kind of bottom up and then move from the inside out. And the reason for that, anyone who's watched this show before has heard me harp about leaf wetness period and how important it is to allow air through that canopy to dry off the leaves or needles or whatever they are. And that's one of the main reasons that the biotic diseases occur bottom up. We have a lot more humid environment at the base of the plants and a lot more humid environment at the center of the plant as opposed to the inside. And so, but yeah, with a lot of our injury that's caused by an environmental factor, there we'll probably start to see injury first occurring on the outside of the plant, and then maybe it's only up at the top as well. There may be some nice straight lines on the plant as well. The other thing that we will tend to look at with the individual plant is any sort of sidedness. Mm-hmm. Do we have injury on the southwest side coming into spring? Well, after a winter like we had last year, not a lot of snow cover, so it was fairly dry. We had heavy winds. We had a lot of winter desiccation that occurred. And so often, in those kind of southerly or southwestern portion of the southwest sides of the plants, they're going to be the ones that are exhibiting a lot of this injury first. And here we have a great example of some nice sided injury. And so again, the blighted areas or the necrotic areas are primarily on the southwest sides of these plants, but also kind of up at the top. But the other thing, we do have some nice kind of straight lines there for where the winds were not hitting the needles near as severe.
So I think one of the things that I know we encounter on Backyard Farmer is even that example. People don't realize, especially with an evergreen, that once it starts to go brown, it's not going to come back. So is that part of the reason they're thinking of that as disease as opposed to winter injury, or people simply don't really understand those environmental stressors?
You know, I think it's maybe a combination of both. There definitely is the case that we have injury that occurs due to environmental factors, and then we just start to see a general decline after that, and they may think that it is spreading, and so it's a biotic disease. Mm-hmm. But I also think that a lot of people just don't really necessarily understand that the environment will cause a lot of these issues too. And so yeah, there is just kind of a lack of understanding. And this was actually a great picture that we had gotten. This came in earlier this spring, and I was a sample that I was working with Elizabeth Killinger on quite a bit, and we had gotten these pictures, and it was just all of a sudden this row of maple trees that previously had been doing great died this year. And last year they were leafing out just fine. This year, not leafing out at all. There was one that kind of started to leaf out a little bit, but not much. And that's kind of brings me to the other part of distribution or patterns. And so we don't only have distribution spatially, but also in terms of time. And so we really like to be looking at what has this site been doing, what have these plants been doing, not just for the last couple of days, couple of weeks, but what happened last year. And after we did a little bit more digging, we received this picture from the client, and these were these same maple trees for about 3 weeks last year. And they were, or at least a couple of weeks, and they were just sitting underwater. That's not going to be good for general plant health.
Right. At least not maples for certain.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You know, a swamp oak or something like that maybe would have been done a little bit better there. But even then, that's with the flooding that we had last year. That's a lot of issues. And when we had those flooded conditions, you know, a lot of the root system just died. We didn't necessarily see the issues last year, but this year, roots are trying to take up nutrients early in the spring, and there's no roots to absorb those nutrients.
Right.
And so as such, we have this injury that occurs. And so that's one of the other reasons that I'll always ask about how quickly have things developed. Is this injury that really seemed to occur just overnight or over the past couple of days? Or is it something that you've been watching for 2 to 3 weeks, maybe 2 to 3 months? I know we do have another picture here as well that has an oak tree, but it just has some flagging branches, and that's much more what we would expect for especially for one of our wilt diseases of some of our trees, where we have it'll start off with one branch being affected, and then that may spread to another branch until we have a few branches, and eventually the entire tree will decline. But again, so this, you know, that uniformity of having the entire tree or the entire plant show injury all at once as well, very unusual for a biotic disease. Typically, that's going to be one of our environmental factors, especially with a lot of the heat that we've been having. You know, we started out this year, it was pretty cool and pretty wet, and then all of a sudden we switched to hot and dry winds. And I know you got a lot of questions about spruce trees that looked exactly like this, where we just had the needles or the tips were all turning brown. And there are a couple of different diseases that we were kind of throwing back and forth there for that they might be, but they're all diseases that tend to hit the lower portion of the plant. Never, or very rarely up top, never throughout the entire plant like we have here. I mean, this, and actually I stand corrected. This spruce here we go. This is the picture that I was referring to originally, but it almost looks like somebody went to every one of those branch tips and painted it brown, or just kind of pinched it. The diseases, most diseases don't do that. They won't hit every branch tip. However, hot, dry winds that occur after we've had a period of cool, wet weather, well, those are going to hit every branch tip. Now we're going to start to have injury that can occur similar to this. Now, when we are looking at diseases on an evergreen, those will tend to be a little bit more similar to the previous picture that we were looking at, where maybe there's just going to be one larger area, again, towards the bottom. Often it started out towards the inside of the plant and it's worked its way out. Is much more common for.
Right, and we do see a lot with the top cankering, don't we, also on spruce?
Yep, we do, and that can be really difficult to tell. Do we have a canker, so that Cytospora canker that's come in? Do we have some winter injury that's caused winter dieback?
Right.
Or was there a critter that was in there and maybe decided to build a nest and kind of injured the tree right up there?
Right.
So that top dieback can be very, very difficult to look at. But then we also want to be looking at, you know, that whole plant. We want to remember that what we're seeing on the plant, maybe the injury is actually something that we're not able to see. And so whenever I get something, and we have the entire plant is wilted, the entire thing is just over the past couple of days, it's just looking poor, similar to this pepper that I got. This was a pepper that came in last year. You know, the guy would Every morning he would come out and it would look pretty good. By late afternoon, the pepper was completely wilted like this. Well, if he had only sent me the top portion of the plant, we never would have been able to figure out what the issue for this was. However, once I got this pepper plant, I started to dissect it a little bit.
Oh.
And when we split the crown tissue, we could see all of that dark discoloration, kind of that brown color on the outside. That is sign of bacterial wilt of the peppers there. And so, one thing that's very common with that disease is that as the plants are using more water throughout the day, that's when we'll start to see a lot more of that wilting occur. And so early in the morning, they looked fine, but late at night, they did not. But again, this discoloration, I kind of wish I had sent another picture that showed further up the stem. Further up the stem, it looked perfectly clean. And so we were not able to find any of that discoloration. So a lot of our root issues, if the base of the plant is dead, the root and crown tissue aren't doing too well, that top part isn't going to do too well either.
So, we do get a lot of questions that really don't give us all the information we need. And one of them, Kyle, before we close here, is we'll get a single leaf of a plant. At least, we know what the plant is, but we'll get a leaf with a pattern in it of some sort. So if you have one leaf of a pepper, what helps you decide, does it belong to you or does it belong to our bug chair, or does it just go in the compost pile and we throw up our hands and say we don't know?
Yeah, again, so that's going to be for, kind of what does the injury look like? What are the lesions looking like there? And so for a lot of our, can be kind of easy with insects. Maybe you can see some chewing patterns, and so okay, the teeth marks. No, that's a grasshopper. That's going to go to the bug chair. But maybe we're just getting something kind of like this, where there's just some general discoloration, some general variegation that's occurring, and that can be tough. So the first way to determine who it goes to. And you kind of named it already. Knowing what the plant is tells us a lot. And so knowing what plant we have, knowing not only the species, but also the individual variety of it, that's going to tell us a lot. Maybe this variegation is normal. Right. Maybe some of these leaf spots are just normal. And so they're really nothing to be concerned about. But some other things that we would want to look for in terms of, does it go to the bug chair or to the path chair? One would be kind of the margins of those leaf spots, and so a lot of our abiotic or a lot of our biotic diseases, our fungi and bacteria, they're often going to start off with there'll be just kind of a yellow speck or that starts off as some discoloration, but then that will spread, and so. But often they will have a nice halo, and so one thing we'll normally look for is kind of a chlorotic halo, or some sort of leaky or kind of wavy margin between the healthy and diseased tissue. We don't get as much of that with insect issues, but as you know, it can be plenty of times where sample question comes to me and I have no idea, and then the bug chair they're the ones that end up nailing it.
Or it goes one to the other, and there's both organisms.
Yes,
involved.
that's definitely another case.
We have a lot of that too. Well, our audience obviously has probably figured out that when we say we just don't know, sometimes we just don't know. We don't have enough information.
Yeah, it can be a lot harder than just looking at,
Exactly. We want to make sure that you watch us on Facebook. Give us all of your great suggestions. Tell us whether you like what we're talking about or you don't like what we're talking about. We'd love to hear that comment back and forth. And of course, it's Facebook through Backyard Farmer or through NET. And that is really all the time we do have for Digging Deeper with Backyard Farmer. Thanks to Kyle for helping us understand those disease issues a little more than we did before. We'll be back next week with another discussion about those landscape topics that matter to you. Do be sure to watch Backyard Farmer live every Thursday at 7 p.m. Central on NET. Thanks for digging deeper with Backyard Farmer.